page 12. Ois Gimel. Let's go dive right into it. So we spoke yesterday about Ilu v'Olu, and we spoke about the difference between the impact of willpower over the mind versus the impact of the mind over the heart. That's a summation of the last Nekuda that we learned yesterday. V'hinei ime yesh agili v'amshocha min ha'moichin ela midas u'bederech ilu v'Olu. Although the way moichin, mind, intellect, is drawn to the emotions, superderech yilvalu, is in a manner that we call it cause and effect, superderech b'meila, which is automatic. B'kol mokum, nevertheless, hinazel davke kishiyesh hachona toiva lahagilui v'amshocha shel hamidos. That's when the midos are kind of prepared to be a recipient to the impact of seichel. In other words, for emotions to be healthy, they need seasoning. If they don't have seasoning, we see they're out of whack. So therefore, for example, a child becomes very emotional very quickly, totally has a meltdown. I wish it would only be by children. Plenty of adults have the same thing, a meltdown, an emotional meltdown. Why? Because the emotions were not prepared to handle the moach. And if there's too much moach, there's too much intellect, or too little for that matter, it does not handle it. So the Rebbe says here, when we talk about the automatic cause and effect relationship, the Rebbe says that's true. When will it happen automatically in a proper way? When you're prepared. If you're not prepared, expect trouble on the road. So what does that mean? How do we get this preparation? So the Rebbe tells us, in addition to contemplating on godliness, and in addition to the fact that not only do you just for a fleeting moment think about Hashem and His creation and everything else, but rather you're meidich, you spend time elaborating and thinking at length His boninus. And here he introduces, of course, the word Chabad, the word that Chabad uses so often, His boninut, His boninus, meditation, contemplation, reflection. And what is that? Leida kol proti in yone hasoga biyadiya teva b'musik. To know every detail of that idea well thought out, understood in great detail. And again here, Yaini, for those that are looking for a understanding, what's the difference between Chabad, his boinenus, and let's say Breslov, his boinenus, or other systems of his boinenus, it says it clearly here without, saying this is the difference. Chabad, his boinenus, is a meditative intellectual process. It's not an emotional process. Whereas, for example, his boinenus really has a very strong element of emotions within the experience called his boinenus. When, talking to Hashem, talking your heart out, right there, it's an emotional experience. I'm not even talking about the fact that it's his boidedut in isolation and all that, but just the tochen, the content of Breslov, his boidedus is definitely leans more to the emotional side than the intellectual side. Whereas in Chabad, it's about his boinenus. Mind you, there were chassidim that practiced his boinenus Hillel privately as well because they didn't want distractions. So, for example, Shabbos, they would come to the minyan, listen to all the chiyuvim, and then go into a private room and daven. Or some even went home. In a Chabad shul in the old country, and some still emulate or try to in the free world, there's a room called a Chabadnitze. Chabadnitze. Now, it's similar to what we call today a Cheder Sheni. But in Chabad, as I've told you all along, has its own lingo, its own dictionary. And the word for the Cheder Sheni is the Chabadnitze. What was the Chabadnitze about, Isser? The Chabadnitze was where an Ovid, someone who served Hashem through Tefillah Ba'arichos, could go to that room after hearing all the chiyuvim and being at the minyan and continue his davening in solitude and quietness, etc. Yes, sir.
So I'm not sure if what I'm observing or what I have observed is that or is something else. But I'll tell you what I have observed amongst people I know who are Lubavitchers who will come in to davening and they will daven, I'll describe it, at their own pace, usually slower than the minyan, and they're not in a rush to catch up. So the question is, where does Tefillah B'tzibur fit in when somebody is davening at their own pace? Now you're saying that they've heard all their chiyuvim, but what I've witnessed is not in sync so much with that.
Well, like with everything else, if what you witnessed is against halacha, then discount it. It's meaningless. However,
I don't want to say it's against halacha. What I'm saying is that I'm because I always there's a difference between davening with a minyan and davening tefillah b'tzibur.
I know.
Tefillah b'tzibur means you are davening Shmona Esrei with
okay.
Kehillah.
I know. Thank you, Baruch Hashem. I've been immersed in this field for the last 40 years. So let me tell you about this. The Chabad system and the Rebbe response to these questions and issues that you bring up and others is that the word tzibur means to congregate, to gather together. The Chabad belief is that you need to congregate the 10 faculties of your soul when you daven. In other words, spiritually, you haven't davened. You've technically davened. You know what I'm saying? You'll get a checkpoint for davening, but you really didn't daven. Zalman Shechter always talk about this, davening. What is davening? Just a robotic thing? Yeah. So there is that robotic Shulchan Aruch daven with a minyan, right? So there were chassidim, and I knew these chassidim, that would start their davening a half hour or an hour before the shul started, so that by the time when the shul was up to Shmona Esrei, they managed to catch up and they got both. They davened Tefillah B'tzibur because they stood together Shmona Esrei with the congregation, and they davened more with Kavanah and his Bananus, and they tried gathering together with Tzibur the 10 faculties. However, those that, need more time, and they come before the minyan starts, or at the minyan starts, and they daven slowly at their pace, because that's the way they have kavanah. In Chabad, in classical Chabad, 200 years of Chabad, that's acceptable. Now, of recent, I found out that, for example, the Brisker have an opinion that you don't need to daven even Shmona Esrei with a minyan. Now, how they explain that, I don't know. But my point is that we're less concerned about the technicalities in true Chabad than the connection. So that's why I emphasized, you need to hear all the chiyuvim. There are chiyuvim of Kedusha and Baruch Hu, different obligations that a Yid is instructed to hear every day. So by being at the minyan, you hear all of these obligations, and you do your best to be with the minyan. But if rushing your tefillah will sacrifice your focus and concentration in Chabad, the choice is not to rush your tefillah. But again, this has been unfortunately abused, misused, and really, it's not. But for example, in yeshiva or more serious shuls or more serious individuals, keep very much to this. And I've seen it. I've done it. That's the answer. Is it clear to you now, or still you have questions?
Yeah, that's clear.
Okay,
It's clear.
let's continue. So what he said, yes,
Before you go,
yeah,
I have seen a practice amongst certain Hasidim, I think in the tradition of Rishon, where the Rebbe davens in a little separate room off to the side.
right.
Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I mean,
Is that right? Am I thinking right?
yeah, you're right. Certain Rebbes, I'm not convinced it has to do with that they're not davening with the minyan. I believe some of them are davening with the minyan, but they want to be in solitude, private. Whether it's because they daven better or that's the tradition. I don't know. In other words, I cannot tell you that Rabbi Yisrael Ruzhner, the father figure of the Ruzhner Chassidus, that's the way he davened. I don't know. It needs to be researched. But in Chabad, the way it worked, for example, Frierdiker Rebbe, our author, Rosh Hashanah night in Chabad, the most prominent tefillah is the first night of Rosh Hashanah. Of all year, that tefillah, even more than the Eilah. And the way that Abbayim, they would spend hours in davening and a lot of times with a lot of tears. And in 1941 or 42, in the early 40s, the previous Rebbe was well enough and had the stamina, and he davened the shul till like 11 o'clock at night. 11, he started at 8 o'clock, hours, and the regular balabatim went home, but the Bacharim and others, they stayed, and they remember it was an awesome experience. So in that case, the Rebbe was kind of bearing his soul through his tefillah, and yet he did it in public. In public in a sense, he did it where he was, So, but some of the Lubavitcher Rebbes, I think maybe the Rashab, they did, after the formal end of the tefillah, go to their room and continue davening. And so we saw the same thing by Chassidim. Rabbi Yoel Kahn, Rabbi Yoel Kahn would say, don't make yourself so holy that you have to run home or escape somewhere. You want to daven kavana, just daven, if you're gaining ego out of this, I'm so special and holy that I don't want anyone to see me, then he said it's a contradiction to the whole essence of davening, and he cautioned against it. Yes, Hillel.
Can you talk a little more about this idea that the tefillah, I guess you're saying of Maariv, of Rosh Hashanah, is the most central tefillah of the year?
Yeah. It's actually today's Tanya. It's so funny you ask. Today's Tanya is Igeres HaKodesh Yud Dalet 14, where the Alter Rebbe speaks about what happens Rosh Hashanah night and what happens Rosh Hashanah day, the first day. You should really, look at it carefully and learn it. And basically, at night, the first night, the world goes into a tardema, a slumber, a sleep. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, it's a risky business. I mean, it's part of Hashem. It's hard to use those words, but it's like it's not here, and Hashem is always here. But Hashem kind of disguises himself and pulls himself back. So it's a very, very, it's an awesome night. So the Rabbeim, again, I didn't hear this, but this is my understanding from the whole subject, that Rabbeim took it very seriously, and they were davening that the world continue being till the morning, till Kiyah Shofar.
That's the Nesira.
That's the Nesira. That's right. That's exactly the Nesira means Avram, the building of the Chava from Adam, right? So that's called in Kabbalah Nesira. So the next day, the Alter Rebbe says in this chapter in 14, it's letter 14, that through, and by the way, there's some very important words. We've learned it before, I think, and maybe we should learn it again, maybe after this Maamar. But the Alter Rebbe says there through the tefillos, not just the tkiyos, he inserts the words through the tefillos of the morning, and culminating with the tkiyah shofar, do we bring back the king, the melech, to want to be a king. In other words, what happens at night is basically says, hey guys, I've given you a year, and I'm not satisfied. So I want to leave. So it's scary. So the night is very, very kind of scary. And that's one nakuda. And that's one point. The other point is on the positive side, that the energy of Rosh Hashanah is Rosh. It's the nerve center. And the nerve center, it's a very delicate, God forbid, if there's an operation needed on the nerve and the brain, and we know how sensitive it is, right? It controls the whole body. So when we enter Rosh Hashanah, we're entering the deepest of the deep as far as the nerves. And that takes a lot of dveikus and a lot of connection. So that's why the first night of Rosh Hashanah, and by the way, it wasn't just by the Rabbeim. The Rabbeim, did it on their level of Kedusha and holiness. But even Chassidim, I recall, I forget which Chassid, Muchkin, Label Muchkin, there's a family Muchkin. And he told over that he remembers seeing...
They're artists, right?
That's
Muchnik.
Muchnik. Thank you. Muchkin. So one of the sons, they had 4 sons. They've 3, only one's left. Anyway, so he told over that I think it was in Samarkand. After they escaped from Russia, they went to Samarkand. So before they left in 46 or 47, so he remembers seeing Rosh Hashanah like a lineup at a wall. In the shul, whatever, a lineup, 1, 2, 3, 4, like Hasidim, just with their heads to the wall and just davening and meditating. And he said it's like it was so real to this, and he himself was from Hasidic stock, but with this lineup, and you didn't see their faces. The famous mashpia of Russia, Samarkand, and then France, the yeshiva, the Chabad yeshiva in Brunois. Brunois is the yeshiva in France. It's a city in France, and there's a yeshiva there, Reb Nissen Nemanov, that was his name. I was told by people who saw this, he would come into shul, Rosh Hashanah morning, 8 o'clock, go to the wall, not leave the wall till after davening. And he didn't have a siddur, a machzor. I guess he memorized it. I don't know what he did. But people were, okay, maybe he made a break, I'm sorry, to make Kiddush at the end. He was a religious guy, so you have to make Kiddush. So he made Kiddush. But they saw him all day standing on the wall and crying, and just the face became red and didn't turn around. I don't know how it's possible, but people saw that. Little children saw it. Because they would say, look at him. Look, the parents say, look at him. You want to see someone who's davening to Hashem on Rosh Hashanah? Look at him. So this idea of tefillah b'kavana, especially as you asked me about Hillel at night, is very, very powerful. They say by Mashpir Reb Yoel, 1 second, the steps in 770, Moshe knows I took you guys up the steps from downstairs to upstairs. Those steps, Reb Yoel sometimes could be sitting on the step like a regular child and crying Rosh Hashanah night. And not crying where everyone could see him, but you could see that the man is elsewhere. And he did. It was packed. He would have sat at a table, but he never placed the seat. He sat down over there after the minyan. So this was a staple in Chabad tefillah, and it of course brings us to the idea that I've said this every time we come to this time of the year, that really, if you're able to, you shouldn't be talking Rosh Hashanah night. At my table, my family knows that I basically don't talk. Sometimes I say, no. Maybe I'll say something, but it's It's machshava. The Rosh Hashanah night is about thought, not about dibur. Dibur is already the next day through the tefillah and the tkiyah shofar. That's dibur. It's yitzchak, as it says in the Sforim. So it's not a time to waste on. Anyway, yes, Yoni.
So it's interesting you just said, I was just about to say that, because first of all, you mentioned two things. First of all, your first part of this year, you were talking about how Breslov is a little bit different than Chabad. You're talking about the way they do his baitinus. However, a lot of what you're saying now is mamish, like, Breslov Chassidus 101. And I'll tell you 101, Breslov number 1, what you just mentioned about the first night of Rosh Hashanah. One of the things I miss very much about Uman, because last couple of years with COVID, wasn't able to go, and then this year with the war, is mamish the first night of Rosh Hashanah, everyone davens together in the klois. So you're talking like 200 to 220 minyanim. Doesn't matter Ashkenaz, Sfar, Temani. Everybody davening in the klois or surrounding the klois, and there's a tainas dibur. Mamish a tainas dibur. People don't talk during the meal. There are certain people, but most real breast lovers do not speak until the following day. But what you do see is that the davening on Meir, the davening the first night of Rosh Hashanah, is something out of this world, like ruchani, and just because nobody's talking, so there's no rechilas, nobody's talking. Everybody's davening, people taking their time. Nobody's rushing to finish. And just the achdus of having everybody in this one huge, massive shul, or around the shul, is just a beautiful sight to see. And it's very, very similar to what you're saying about, Rav Khan and
I wanted to, I still want to get there one year. It's Hashem. I had a chance 2 years ago. The sponsor wanted me to go, but I couldn't go. So Emir Hashem. But let's get back to the text, okay? Okay, so now we're on page 12. Let's see. So we're learning here. So in addition to understanding the details as versteht im Inyan Seichel Ruchni, was tracht in ihm, und azoi wie versteht Inyan Gashmi. What does it mean, Avram, to understand godliness? He says here, just like you understand something physical, you could explain in great detail your violin, your instrument that you use to play your beautiful music, right? It's Gashmias. So too, the power of his bonus, the right kind of his bonus that you can explain godliness in detail. The Rebbe says this comes specifically when you're marich, when you elaborate your hisbonenus, with what you understand. Look, he tells us here a recipe very clearly. You need to review choser, the concept you're thinking about, b'machshavta, in your mind, harbe pe'omim, many times, b'zeh achar zeh, over and over. We're not used to this. We learn something, we study it, next. No, his bonus means over and over, understanding it, thinking about it. Uv'chol pam upam, and each time that you review it, Nitesiv loy ezer beirur v'oymik ba'asoga. There is an additional clarity and depth to the idea that's added each time you review it. In Yiddish, a klarkeit, which means a clarity, klar from the word clarity, unatifkeit from the word tif, deep, clear and deep. Hila, you see, now he adds the word dveikus. So here you see a little bit how Chabad sees dveikus. Dveikus isn't just a good laugh or a good cry or a good shake. Chabad dveikus comes after understanding something very well. Then your mind is davuk, is glued to the idea. That's the way he sees dveikus. And that time, Moshe, that idea is grasped, nitfas, v'sichloi through your mind. And the longer you take to reflect and to deepen your mind on the godly concept that you're thinking about and learning about, so not only, it's a two-way street, Avram, right? There is the concept and there is the mind understanding the concept. So the Rebbe says that it's not just from the perspective of the concept being understood, but the mind becomes one with the concept. Says the Rebbe, although you've done all of this, look what it says here. Nevertheless, there won't be an actual birth of an emotion, hamasima lasoga, that's fitting for this level of comprehension. Imlei tia hashova el halev tchila, v'hashevoisa elevavecha, v'yodaito hayom. Know Hashem today. What does the Torah say? V'hashevoisa. What does hashevoisa mean? Anyone?
Return.
Yeah, but in this context, doesn't mean return. It means, attentive. Very good. Attentive.
I had it written in from years ago.
That's fine. That's good. That's what I want to see. Good. Vashevoisa.
I still read my old handwriting.
Baruch Hashem. Im loitia shovel left chila. There needs to first be, this is very interesting, Moshe. You can learn something and understand it and reflect and meditate on it. You want it to be an emotion, belev. You want it to be a heart palpitation. You need to have a tentativeness of the heart to that idea. Ki hamidas minaseichel einam bois b'derech memela memela mi'atzmus min atzmus haseichel. And here is the bombshell, and that is, the midos, in their very pure form, will not come from the outer trappings of intellect. They only come from what's called atzmus haseichel, the essence of seichel. What is the difference? There is seichel that's already, what's the word they use today, tweaked. How is this seichel tweaked? It knows that its job is to get the emotions to go somewhere, to feel something, right? That's not pure seichel. That's a seichel that's already a subordinate to the midah. And that's one type, and that's where we say ilu v'olu, cause and effect. That type of seichel will impact the midah, that there'll be an effect. But, that midah is not pure midah. Or better said, it's not authentic midah. Why? Because it's not coming from the unadulterated seichel. It's coming from an adulterated seichel. It's coming from a seichel that's not removed completely from midah, but it's a seichel that's already tweaked for midah. So it's as though, let's think of it this way, Yoni. Think of it this way. You have already. It's a preconceived idea. It's preconceived. What makes it preconceived? The emotion, because you know that this is what you should feel. This is what you should work towards. So you get your mind to justify and create that feeling. The feeling that's created from it is not authentic 100%. It's already a watered down, I like that word, a watered down type of midah, because it comes from a watered down, compromised, Avram will use the word compromised, a compromised seichel. And what will create a unadulterated midah? When it comes, what he says here, it comes from the essence of seichel. Let's continue. How does it work? What I just said now he's going to say in Hebrew, in the Maamar. After moichin is nisalem, conceals and hides itself, umeidem achakach b'tzimtzum, and it shines in a contracted form, uve'oifem mahus acher mimahusam hakodem, and now its appearance is in a very different essence than the way it was before. Shu inyana b'chein. Now its orientation is bottom line. So the seichel is already thinking bottom line. That's not pure seichel. That's not pure intellect. Pure intellect transcends bottom line. It's like the genius professor that, who comes in and he doesn't care whether anyone understands. He has one thing in mind. He's going to now share pure logic and intellect. The fact that no one understands, who cares? Now, the answer is, so what's the benefit? That's when you're looking for benefit. That's when you're looking for students. That's when you're looking for results. But there is a position where it goes beyond that. And what we're saying here is that to get the best of the midah, you need to tap into that unadulterated level of seichel. But from pure intellect, there won't be any midah ki mispailu sichle levad. You know what you'll get? I'm sorry. When you use an adulterated seichel, you get what's called emotional intellectualism. You don't get a heart palpitation. I told you, taking out the garbage for your wife in the morning, you don't have a heart palpitation of loving your wife when you take out the garbage. If you do, you should see a psych. No. Why are you doing it? Because it's the right thing to do. Be a mensch. She cooks and cleans and all that. Take the garbage out. So when you take the garbage out, your mind is already in a position of what we call hispailu sichli, emotional, an intellectual emotionalism. It's an emotion that's within the mind. And that's not pure midah. Look what he says in Yiddish. He's impacted intellectually. It's such in other words, I understand how valuable my wife is. Wow, unbelievable. I'm taking the garbage out. Right? So your intellectual fascination creates within the brain, within the mind, a notion, a movement. But it's all part of the brain. Yes, Moshe.
Isn't this again just classic moach sholet alalev?
Isn't what? You gotta be, isn't what? What's the what?
The idea of being misbonen. You're misbonen and you're being misbonen on how much your wife does on a daily, weekly basis for you, for the family, etc. So that's gonna naturally, a person who's right, you appreciate that intellectually, and that translates into feeling appreciated emotionally,
right,
to one's wife.
But that means that you then will do the right thing. But it doesn't yet mean that the feelings that you have, the deep feelings of Ava and everything that you're not having that at that time. You're understanding it. You just said, I understand, I appreciate, I understand. That's in that example, and that's fine. For that example, that's fine. But when you talk about you want to, we were talking months ago with Issa, but when you want to feel something, that's a whole different. That's a different level. Feeling something is a very different level. It's a different. It's not. I'm just doing what's right, and I appreciate what you're doing. That's not an emotion. That's not a heartfelt emotion. Yeah, what?
I just want to say I have to add this in, and maybe in Hillel, interesting for you to what your take on this. I was listening to a talk given by You've heard of Rabbi David Palkowitz?
Yes.
Okay. So
Not rabbi, doctor.
doctor, excuse me, Dr. David Belkowitz. So
Yeah.
I was listening to a talk going back, I don't know, let's say a couple months ago.
Okay.
And the talk was on marriage, which, he's spoken about this,
Yeah.
obviously umpteen amount.
Yeah.
Did something, though, that I thought was very, very interesting. He was speaking about marriage. He was speaking about some things. All of a sudden, he put in the middle of his talk, I don't know, it sort of almost came from like left field. He said, he put in the words, he said, by the way, he said, when a person meditates on and thinks about and recalls all the wonderful qualities of one's wife, what she does for the family, I don't know, etc. He said, it is a tremendous, I'm paraphrasing what he said, a tremendous preventative for infidelity. And then he said those words, and then he just continued on with whatever he was talking about.
Okay.
It was like he was speaking. He made this pause, just put this in. It's like and then he just kept talking about whatever it was he was speaking about before. So I'm bringing this up because I thought that was brilliant what he did. But my point in bringing this up is almost as if this is in a way I feel like an example what he said of what we're talking about. Obviously, the example that he gave, let's say, would be the extreme in a way in the other way. The point I'm getting at is that the point that I'm getting at is just that the moach shalat halev, I don't know. I mean, maybe it could bring one to appreciate one's wife, or something else in a deep emotional way.
I have to go, but basically, the example that you're sharing from what he said, I'm hearing it very differently. I'm hearing it that basically he's talking about like this is spinal sickly, not the deep level of, in other words, you want to avoid infidelity, praise your wife, have a relationship. Okay, that's one level, that's practical. To me, that's similar taking out the garbage. It's just another example of taking out the garbage. Is that what we talk about when two people go under the chuppah? They have chuppah v'kedushin? They have chuppah v'kedushin, so you should avoid infidelity? You should take no. So you have to compare apples to apples. What I'm saying is that's all true. What he's saying, what you're saying, it's all true. But it's not what we talk about, a midah of ava in your heart. And frankly, if you don't develop that midah, you're always at risk of infidelity. So in a way, you have to touch that core essence in the relationship for that to be, kind of guarantee. And there's no guarantees, but guarantee. Anyway, let's talk more about this maybe on Monday, okay? Because it's an important point. Everyone should have a great Shabbos, and we'll see everyone on Monday. Have a great Shabbos. Sei gesund. Bye.
A good Shabbos to everybody.
Pseudo Bye-bye.